One of the toughest moments for any creator is starting a new project and coming face to face with that blank page, that blank canvas, as the time ticks and the deadline itches closer and closer. It is in this inception where the creator must pick between the safe path or the path that wanders into the unknown. But this decision is not an easy one, as some stare at the blank void and let it suck them in. Others look away, as in the blankness two eyes form, fixating a gaze, and so the person is forced to look away. Some bravely stroke and attack the blankness, but fear still seeps through, even if the person has created time and time again. This fear impacts beginners who are beginning to create and experts alike, for in creation there is doubt in the unknown. Those who stick to the safe path tend to start with ease and write alongside the guidelines to near perfection to escape this fear. But even these perfectionists face doubt and face fear. The fear that their creations will be too mundane, the fear that they played things too safe. But these creators are also able to escape this fear through validation by getting that A or by winning a competition, much like the main character in the anime Barakamon. Those who feel the most fear are those who take a leap into the unknown and into the fifth dimension, the dimension of imagination, where risks creep out in every turn and the fear of fun is embraced. This brings me to my next point: no to my confession. In the past, I was not a good writer. I sucked. For the longest time, I doubted myself and the essays I wrote. I remember throwing essays that were returned to me and hiding them. I refused to look at the feedback, but I somehow made it through each time. I did not take writing seriously until I was told that I could no longer teach psychology as a high school educator and that my alternative was teaching English language arts. But to get my English minor, I had to take honor level courses, and I fell into an abyss of despair. I didn't have the confidence, and I told myself I could never reach that level. This was a lie, because my history essays were actually top-notch, and when I went back and reviewed them, passion bled from every word. And although the topics were bleak, I loved writing, and I loved writing about history. So I marched into these top-level English courses, and I did my first practice essay. It wasn't very good. It was about Edmund Spencer and his shepherd's calendar, things I did not exactly vibe with. However, I was set on becoming a teacher, so I took the elevator up to the English department and met with my professor. They were so happy to see me, and they did something no other language teacher did. They went over the rules of the English language and provided me a different perspective. I no longer saw writing as this boring task, but as this puzzle where word, sentence structure, and punctuation created meaning. After this, I became an essayist who followed the rules and got good grades. But the story doesn't end here, because getting good grades is not the ultimate goal, and there are many goals one can seek when writing an essay. For instance, some who write essays ask themselves these questions. Will this essay be useful for the future? Will anyone learn something new? Am I bringing a new perspective? Or has this been done before? There are also goals of perfection. Was this essay clear? Were there any ambiguities? Did I write too much? Should I be more concise? Does everything flow? Does everything connect? These are all questions that arise in the edit, and my editing process was vigorous. I did 9 edits to scrub and perfect my essays. However, I did not continue on this path, because at some point my essays became too formulaic and too mundane. I stopped growing, and fear began to invade my conscience. I began to stare at my screen or at my page. The clock ticked and the pressure was on, the deadline itching closer and closer. Thoughts flooded my mind. Questions bred more questions. What does my professor mean? What am I missing? What will get me an A? How do I grow? How do I become a better writer? Even when I wrote drafts and they were not good, so I stopped because the eyes that formed from that blank page were too much. And so I looked away and was overwhelmed by fear. Instead, I started to watch an anime called Barakamon, and it's an anime that changed my life. Barakamon is the story of Handa Sushui, an award-winning narcissist calligrapher. The show starts out quite dramatically as the director comments that Handa's work is dull, mundane, and textbook-like, but most importantly, that Handa has not found his own style and is merely mimicking others and writing in a way that judges prefer. He is taking the safe path. This critique or feedback causes Handa to get angry and punch the director in the face. However, the show runs deeper, as Handa's art or his style is directly tied to him finding his own path as an artist. The key question Barakamon asks is, how will Handa overcome such a wall and find his own path? And that question was the same question that I was asking myself. So, there are rare moments when an anime descends down from the heavens, and Barakamon was perfect because I was in the same spot as Handa, and I did not know the answer to overcoming my wall. The answer Satsuki Yoshino provides in her manga is nothing complex that requires an Einstein to figure out, as it's rather simple. It is so simple, in fact, that for many artists or creators, it is actually difficult to implement. What I and Handa were missing was fun. When a child makes art, they do it without worry and approach it playfully. There is no thought about what the professor or the director will think or like. Rather, it is creating for the sake of fun, and in this method, mistakes are welcomed. Although Barakamon provided me a breakthrough, actually implementing fun in the method of playfulness into a university or honor level essay was not an easy task. This is because to do it, I had to take a leap into the unknown and take risks. However, this is what language and writing is all about. The way I overcame fear was through reading the essays of Jacques Derrida, where he playfully counters Jacques Lacan in his essay, The Animal, Therefore I Am. The text I had to analyze and compare to Derrida was Edgar Allan Poe's The Black Cat. In reading both, I mixed their writing styles and ideas as if they were paint and approached the essay with a trial and error mentality. I no longer saw the essay as this rigid puzzle, but as a canvas, and I became a painter. A painter who painted with ideas, words, commas, semicolons, and periods. I grabbed writing styles and ideas and twisted them, tested them, and infused them with my own style. The essay I created would be named To Meow or Not to Meow. A title I borrowed from Shakespeare's To Be or Not to Be, but the title matched the essay because it was about being and about cats having souls. It was also about nakedness. To this day, I remember writing it and laughing as I wrote it. I felt like a mad scientist who was being tongue-in-cheek with the words I inked. And you know what? I cried when I read the feedback because my professor underlined how I grew, and I felt it too. I had overcome a wall that seemed impossible to scale. In his video, Influence Courses Are Garbage, The Dark Side of Content Creation, Super Eyepatch Wolf discusses many things, such as how algorithms impact creators' mental health, or force some to create content they do not want to, but have to. This process of catering to the algorithm is also linked to the idea of the fear of fun, because it adds pressure on the creator and the path they take. But I'm getting ahead of myself because I want to focus on a single question Wolf asked himself once he reached 1 million subscribers. What's next? It's a question I've also asked myself as I knew I grew, but what was next? How could I surpass that essay? In my march through education, the essays I produced stunned my professors as I was branching away from the rigid method and writing with metaphor and passion. I loved philosophy and critical theory and was borrowing from thinkers to create what I dubbed a creative essay. I still argued and researched, but I sought to escape the dull format of the essay and tell stories. To many, my writing was not that of a historian or a language teacher, but that of a poetic philosopher. However, in my path to become an educator, I encountered many new theories that shifted my perspective, or rather gave me new lenses to see the world. I noticed that teaching was an art in itself, and so I stepped into a new realm, one that was vastly different from writing, and one that involved all forms of literacies. In this stage of my life, I returned back to the beginning, back to being a beginner, but this time it was not a blank page that I spent my days staring at, but an empty classroom. My first year of teaching was hell. It was hell because I could not be the teacher who I wanted to be. My preferred teaching style was continuously criticized. My teaching style, or my teaching philosophy, was first influenced by Parker Palmer, who was an educator who took a stand against objectivist teaching, where professors or teachers are placed in a static role to teach amateurs about the objective truth through a filter, because because they apparently know what's best. The student is also not a learner, but an amateur who must be taught how to think and what to think. Palmer disagreed with this style of teaching and rather saw learning as a web of relation between the knower and the subject. It is also in this web where knowledge is created, as the knower and the subject are intimately linked through relations. But these nexuses of relations also become a community, and so he dubbed this method of teaching the community of truth. But when I adopted it, I called it the community of learning, or of learners, because my objective wasn't the truth, but learning. It became my goal not to conform. I did not want to be a teacher or an educator who stands above my students with absolute authority, and I did not want to tell them what to think or how to think, but rather I aim to be a facilitator of knowledge, a person who guides students and helps them figure out their path, but also form relations between them and knowledge. In this role of facilitator, I also aim to learn from them and their stories. So I stepped into my first class. It was a class of ruffians who had zero interest in history, but I faced them and I started teaching. I used everything I had learned until this point, such as the lesson Barakamon taught me, but also my experience as an essayist. The teaching philosophy that I leaned on was a philosophy of fun. My students were given flexibility and room to make mistakes, to question the world and reflect. They had a lot of fun, and I look fondly at my early days as a teacher. I became known as the teacher who told stories, but also the teacher who was kicked out of his mentor's classroom for being too rad. Although my students loved me, my two mentors hated my style and criticized every single part of it. I took their assessments day after day after day. They wanted me to teach in a traditional style because it's a method that apparently always works, and they told me that's how teaching has always been done. It's a style that's rather boring, rather stiff, and dull. It's where students are forced to learn from a textbook and not from what interests them, but I resisted because teaching like that was not working, and so some days I returned to my car and I cried. Some nights I laid awake thinking if I was good enough. I hated my ELA mentor. She was an uptight white lady who loved PewDiePie and JK Rowling. Although I was at the brink of a breakdown, I made it through and I escaped hell. With the help of a third mentor and my students, who sensed the tension between me and my ELA mentor. At the very end, my students told me they wished I could keep teaching them, and I laughed as I cried in the inside. Coming back from that hellish experience, I did not know what was next. I wasn't confident and the pressure kept mounting. This was when I encountered my second inspirational source, Nick Sousanis, in his book Unflattening. Sousanis changed how I saw teaching and the importance of art. This was also my lost future phase, where I kept telling people how cool hauntology was, and they kept staring at me, thinking I was talking about ghosts. With my new lenses on, Sousanis seemed like what was next, as he blended a graphic novel style with philosophy and academia. His book guides the reader to a path of relationality, but also multiple paths of imagination. An imagination that allows us to escape what he calls flatland and to unflatten art or education or anything really. I became an educator who wanted my students to not just study history, but imagine a better future, and I danced around my classroom as we created videos, posters, news, and history. It was fun. However, everything seemed like it was forever until it was no more. Before the plague, I had lost heart in teaching, and I asked myself if students could learn while having fun. I kept wondering if I wanted to be a teacher, because it was at this point where some of the whitest students showed their teeth. Once my practicum ended, they showed their Islamophobia, and I became disheartened. I lost heart because I realized how white schools were, but also I felt the weight of teaching. I was lost. I felt like I was fumbling. My peers got worried. So I went to my favorite professor and I told him I lost heart, that I couldn't teach anymore, and my passion to teach was gone. I cried because it was painful, but also because I felt empty. I still remember the words he told me. He told me, whenever you lose heart, remember why you set yourself on this course, to put trust in your strength and to lean on others. I walked out of his classroom searching for more answers. Why did I become a teacher? Well, I became a teacher to change the world, and to provide my students an education that I did not receive. I became a teacher to teach history so that my students can imagine a future. I became a teacher because I thought it would be fun. I then went into my next practicum fired up till everything was forever until it was no more. You might think that education has absolutely nothing with where the story began, as how is the act of teaching similar to writing? In my perspective, teaching is an art. And when I taught, it was like I was dancing, as I was in a continuous conversation with my students on what they needed. There were days where I dodged bullets of words that were thrown at me, and on other days, I was dodging chairs. See, teachers are artists too, as they start with an empty page and sketch their lesson plans and a path that they want to guide their students. This initial sketch becomes reality inside the classroom, but this form of art takes place in some classrooms and not all. For I've met a lot of flat teachers who think teaching is all about going over the facts, or specifically teaching students the proper way so that a handful of students may pass an exam or get top marks. There are others who are stuck in a rut, recycling old materials and shake in fear whenever something new is introduced, because it shakes up the "this is always how it's been done" philosophy. In some schools, teachers who enter the job energetic to shake things up are forced to inherit the philosophy of "this is always how it's been done." They become flat. Teaching is complex, as there is never a single type of learner. There are those who learn best from reading, listening, and reviewing. But equal to all three, there are those who learn best from play. By play I mean gaming, but also drawing and doodling, moving, shooting hoops, or fooling around. To be a teacher for me meant to be a dancer, but also a painter, and I pulled ideas from every single corner of the literacy box. I tried my best to teach my students lessons that would help them in the future. I was proud of my lessons, but there were some days where I failed and nothing worked. Nick's book, Unflattening, taught me a lot about literacies, and for years, I was flat and caged in the limits of the written word. I could not see the other forms of art and their value, but once I began teaching and learning, I understood what Nick was talking about, that in truth, anything can be art. There is an art to being a doctor, as many perform their art on and inside bodies. The game developer, stringing lines of code, is an artist. The scientist, who is seeing the world through different angles, is also an artist. There is an art in being a gardener or a driver. However, other forms of art should also be valued, such as sculptures, models, tattoo artists, musicians, painters, manga, comic book authors, writers, and of course, video essayists. Your art matters, and whatever you create, you should be proud of it and love it. Also, I have another confession to make. I quit teaching because although I was a dancer and I loved the job, I started to have panic attacks. I couldn't sleep. The question, what's next? It haunted me. It kept me awake as the specter kept hounding me night after night. What's next? What's next? What's next? It wasn't just that question, but teaching was taxing, and doing it for a full year and COVID caused me to break down. So I quit. I got lost. I spiraled. I didn't know what was next. My future seemed to be lost. It seemed as if I had lost my teacher's heart. I felt soulless. And this was when I first started to do YouTube. And my videos got no views, but I didn't care because I wanted to have fun and make art. January 6th happened, and I took this video essay making seriously, creating the fanaticism of Trumpism. But that wasn't enough because I was angry and bothered by what was happening in Palestine, and so I looked into the history of how right-wing Zionism originated from Poland. It didn't get any views, but it mattered. The question didn't magically disappear, and it was amplified by those around me. What's next? What's next? What is next? I told them, I'll do masters. I'll become a professor. But even through my masters, a new question kept creeping into my mind, and it was one my mentor used to ask me. What do you want? What's my path? Am I being true to myself? See, the fear of fun extends beyond the creation of art and bleeds into the real world. Many children who are born from immigrant parents are placed on a set path to become engineers or doctors. Their paths are prescribed and pressured. Some parents set their children's destinies from an early age and cage them in a flat land. But what's next for them? What's their future? What's our path? These were the questions that took hold of me when I was writing a master's essay on Palestine and statelessness, because for many children who were born in Canada from immigrant parents, their future is to get assimilated into the Canadian capitalist culture. How much culture has been lost? Can us, the children of immigrants, imagine a future? I thought I had rebelled. I became a teacher who had dreams of changing the world, but was that really what I wanted? Nick's book explores paths And for him, many people begin their path in a flatland where people are placed in a fixed, rigid path. But Nick also prescribes a way out through what he calls an unflattening, where a person sees the world through different lenses and creates art. For Nick, it is imagination that allows people to escape the flatness and allows them to start walking their own path. The fear of fun plays a role in what path we take because many of us cling onto the safest path where you rise up the ladder and exploit others. The safe path gets you grades and a good job and a place in the system. The safe path is conformity and one where there is no resistance to the system. The safe path is boring, it is dull, it is mechanical, and void of creativity, void of imagination. The safe path prevents people from imagining a future without capitalism and allows them to hold the belief that the future has been lost. It is a future of lost futures. And the path of fun? Well, it's a path of risk, but also growth. It's a path of the unknown, but one that is filled with imagination where realism can be combated. It's a path where creators are at their most vulnerable, but also the closest to being themselves. It's a path where art works as a form of resistance to the system, and people may rage against the machine, rage against the dull, the nihilism, the hierarchies, and the conformity. In raging, imagining, and creating, people are able to fill the void with a world of joy, hope, and liberation. It's a world where lost futures becomes found futures, and possibilities spring, and through relationality and solidarity, we are able to make the world a better place. So after I finished a term of masters, I took a leap and returned to YouTube. I spent 2 months researching and a month writing and creating a video essay that is now known as Attack on Titan and the Road to Fascism. I don't know what's next. What I do know is that I'm walking on the path of fun with fear, but not so much that it will stop me because I found people to guide me, people who appreciate what I make, and friends who support me every day. However, even before I got the views and the subs, I entered the space confidently in what I made, and I was so proud of my Attack on Titan video and so confident it was good I showed it to FD Signifier. I didn't think he would notice me or show me out, but he did, and I'm grateful because now I can share my stories to 2,000 eyes and more. Now I do not know what's next, but I do know I want to share my stories, make video essays, and create art. Are there days where I stare at the analytics and feel fear? Yes! And in those days, I am tempted to conform and produce content that appeases the mighty algorithm. Do I feel fear every single time I upload a video? Yes, but I'm going to make more. Am I currently feeling fear as I write this, record this, edit this? Yes, but I'm going to have as much fun as I can. Why? Because in treading into the unknown, into the dimension of imagination, I believe we can imagine a world without capitalism and a world where the future is not lost. This video has returned to where it began, as for hours I stared into the heading of the end, and I did not know what was next. What are ends? Do stories really end? Can history ever end? The indigenous storyteller Thomas King played a vital role in every single step of my journey to become a writer. These are some of his books, but don't read them, as the stories are meant to be listened to. You can listen to some through his Massey Lectures series, where he tells people the truth about stories. I have decided to end the story much like Thomas King ends his. This story, my story of how I became a writer, it's yours. Do with it what you will. Tell it to friends. Turn it into a TV show or an anime. Forget about it. But don't you say in a few years to come that you would have lived your life differently if only you've heard this story. Because you've heard it now. Hey folks, welcome to the end of the video where I ramble, but this time I'm not gonna ramble. Instead, I'm gonna thank those who subscribed. The 1,000 of you who subscribed to this channel. I'm actually super shocked and super surprised that I hit over 1,000, and here's to 1,000 more. I want to say a big thank you to all those who inspired me to create this, to have fun with this, and to tell my story. Next video is going to be a lot more research focused. It's an essay that I have long written, but it's one that's going to be transformed into a video essay. It's about how George W. Bush is the devil. If you think it's going to be more chiller, like this video was quite intense, right? I got really intense in this video. And George Bush, fuck that guy, you know? Fuck you, George Bush. Fuck you. But that video is going to be quite intense, as it's about the words that killed and about Islamophobia in America, but it's also an Islamophobia that is felt here in Canada as well, to be honest. And yeah, so I'm gonna start recording that as soon as possible. I'm probably gonna take a few days off and play some Spider-Man, and then I'm gonna get cracking on that video. So keep your eyes open for that, and until then, salam.